From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's today's lineup. K-State's Glynn Tonsor is featured on this week's Cattle Market segment. He'll go back over the numbers from last week's USDA Cattle-on-Feed Report, and Glynn discusses the latest developments with the regulation of cell-cultured meat products and the implications for the cattle sector. Then K-State's Jaymelynn Farney will provide an update on the Sunflower Supreme Heifer Development Program, which invites you producers to enroll heifers in this certification protocol. She'll also have details of the program's heifer sale coming up next week. And on this week's 4-H segment, Jeff Wickman visits with K-State's Anissa Jepsen about 4-H science, engineering, and technology projects and after-school programming. All this and more coming up on Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome once again to Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. And our cattle market segment opens up the week now with Glynn Tonsor, Mike's Side, livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension. We'll venture into several items, including cell-cultured meat and the latest USDA Cattle-on-Feed Report among our topics with Glynn today. But to look back on the holiday abbreviated trading week this past week, Glynn, well, a positive tone to it by and large.
Yeah, so the transactions we did have were positive. As you said, it was shortened. The 5-market average fed cattle cash price came in. It was called at $115, but there was actually some Kansas sales at $117. Some of our listeners may have been a benefactor of that. When you look over to the board, the nearby December live cattle contract closed Friday at over $117. That was up about $2 for the week. When you flip over to feeder cattle, the cash side, I wrote down the Wednesday Oklahoma City prices. They were flat to $4 up. 2 different lots I wrote down here is 153 head, 570 pounders, sold at $146. Slightly heavier lot at $625, sold for $149. Obviously, there's a slight quality difference there because the heavier lot brought more. The nearby feeder cattle contract in January was $149 and change on Friday, and that was up about $3 for the week. So, as you said, there was a, albeit lower volume in many ways, particularly on the feeder cattle side, because of the holidays. There was a positive tone in the cash markets last week.
So what, if anything in particular, was at the root of that price improvement last week, in a broad sense?
Well, I think there's some favorable tones in the cold storage report we're going to talk about, and then the cattle-on-feed report, which, of course, came out on Wednesday. But, you know, the on-the-ground fundamentals that are in that report are supportive, so maybe we'll take them in that order.
Sure.
The cold storage report came out, I would call it neutral, maybe slightly supportive for beef. Beef stocks are up 2% from last month and 2% from last year. That particular point probably is not supportive because it means we're growing just a little bit of beef in the pipeline. However, the competing meat space, there are some good things there, particularly on the pork side. So pork stocks are down 3% from last month and a full 5% from last year. Keep in mind we're producing a lot more pork than we did in the past. That's confirmation that we're moving it. It's not getting stacked up. There's been concerns, particularly with our trade discussions and so forth on the pork side and what that would mean for beef. The fact that we aren't stacking up pork is a really good thing. As a bit of a sidebar, USDA ERS put out a report sometime during the holiday shortened week and noted that relative to production, this is actually the lowest amount of pork we have on stock since 1990. So we do have higher volumes, but you got to put it in context. You know, we're producing a lot more pork too. Stuff goes through the freezers at some point in many ways. So we are moving pork, and therefore that's really good on the beef side. When you look at poultry real quick, it's down 9% from last month. So we made notable gains from the stocks last month, but we are up 4% from last year. So when you wrap all that around and put our beef hat on for a second, I would say that's kind of a neutral report.
It's a push.
It's a push. Yeah. So there wasn't any adverse surprises there. When we flip over to the cattle-on-feed report, very rarely am I willing to universally call a report good. Usually can poke holes in it if you have some concerns. And this would be one I would say is definitely supportive. So the inventory number was up 3% on November 1st. That was on the low end of our pre-report estimates, so there's quote-unquote fewer cattle out there than most were anticipating. Marketings were up 5% in October. That was on the high end, so we pushed more out than most were expecting. When I say high end, I mean the high end on the range of pre-report estimates. And then placements were down 6% in October, and that was on the low end of the range of estimates. So in all three cases, we were off from the average, and we were on the kind of the ends of the range of those pre-report estimates in a supportive way. Anytime you have inventories down a little bit, marketing's up, placements down, that's very supportive. And to me, it just says we're staying fairly current. We're able to move the beef. I made the comment about the 2% growth in cold storage stocks. One of the reasons I'm not worried about it is things like that marketing's number in this Cattle-on-Feed report. And because of the uniqueness of this past week, the board was actually open on Friday, and we did see the live cattle contract tick up a little bit on Friday, which is not surprising. When all the traders are back and participating, I anticipate early this week we start on a good foot as well.
We've been talking about placements most of 2018 to the upside, and now we see these numbers. Has the feedlot sector turned a corner on placements to the better?
Most likely. I mean, this report would be consistent with that. Where to watch in the market would be, the April timeline. So when those cattle will be coming out on the back end out in 2019. When we look at those prices, we'd anticipate them going up, reflecting those placements coming down in recent months. From what we can tell, I think the answer to that's yes. Part of the reason I'm pausing is we're still somewhat guessing, trying to put together the puzzle on how many feeder cattle are out there ready to be placed tomorrow per se, or how many have been, just kind of on the horizon. And that's something that we can indirectly look at, but we don't really have good indicators until you get things like this Cattle-on-Feed report. So I think we've turned the corner, but I do think we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a large cow inventory and therefore a calf crop that's going through this system.
So time will tell. That'll be monitored, of course. Glynn, you spent some time at a recent meeting of professionals looking at beef demand in some specific terms. Talk about that and what was discussed.
Yeah, so I was at an annual convention in Hawaii, actually, which, yes, there is a cattle industry in Hawaii as well. I won't bore us with all that here. But what I was asked to do was outline the concepts of beef demand, kind of what's the status, what are some knowledge gaps, and I'm going to connect that with a recent announcement as well. But I'm mainly bringing that up here for two reasons. One is the slides from that talk are on our Ag Manager website. Anybody wants to look at that, they are welcome to it. Demand is not consumption. I've beat that dead horse a lot, but that was a theme to my talk. And if you want some examples of that, that's in my talk. Your listeners are welcome to pull that up. But the other reason I'm bringing it up was to the more immediate relevancy for producers today is, I've been making the note that demand has been helping support prices, but at the same time, we've been blessed by a very good macroeconomic environment. So here domestically and even abroad, global and domestic economic growth has been good. On beef in particular, when consumer incomes go up, we tend to see beef demand go up. If and when we have a recession, there's a reason to be concerned about what domestic beef demand will be. And I'm not here to say we're going to have a recession tomorrow. It's not the point of that at all. But anybody that's been watching the stock market, some of the concerns that are inflected there about what interest rates are going to be, there's lots of concerns there I won't belabor. But when we have the next recession, that will most likely be adverse for domestic beef demand. And I know that's a Dr. Bear point, but we haven't had to talk about it in a while, and it's probably prudent that people start thinking about it.
You say that part of your presentation also centered on another alternative meat, if you will, and that would be plant-based beef as it's described, and that is a whole hot-button topic unto itself. What thoughts did you have on that?
Yeah, so most of our listeners probably know there's a whole gamut of, let's call them new and potential protein sources out there. Some are plant-based, some are cell culture-based. My two main points in that talk, and it relates to an announcement that came out while I was traveling, is I think we all need to recognize the world needs and wants, and I think will pay for more protein. We're all aware of the, feed the world in 2050, 9 billion people talk. Embedded in that is most think we're going to have demand for protein growing. Embedded in that is optimism for beef, pork, chicken demand and exports out of the U.S. Those are all kind of well-grounded thoughts that yours truly holds and so do others. But also embedded in that is there's probably room for multiple proteins. I'm highlighting that because this is probably not the last of this discussion. There's probably going to be new protein offerings that come up because we have a strong global demand pull for protein. So get used to these confusing discussions because I think there's a monetary pull to get these new products in front of folks. That's point number one. point number 2, what does it mean for conventional meats like beef that's produced here out of Kansas on live animals out of Kansas feed yard is to be determined. And a lot of it has to do with how those new products are labeled, how they're received by consumers. Now I'm pointing at some of these knowledge gaps in economist sees is we don't really know how price sensitive those current buyers are. We don't know if people are buying it once as a novelty item just to say they've tried it, or if they become repeat buyers. Of those that are buying, are they heavy meat buyers to start with, so they've switched, or were they kind of fringe non-meat eaters or low volume eaters? I tried to walk through some of those points in my recent demand talk. In many ways, we have more economic questions than answers there, but I hope our listeners recognize I don't think this issue is going away because there's a big economic pull for more protein in our system. So I think we're going to keep having these kinds of discussions, but at the same time, we being society here could benefit by more knowledge about basically economics of substitution and who is or isn't buying those products.
And you referred to that announcement that recently came out about which agency will regulate cell-cultured food products, including meat products of this ilk. USDA and FDA will be jointly doing so. And
Right.
How does that ring with you?
Yeah, narrowly, the announcement came out on Friday the 16th, so the Friday before Thanksgiving, that it will be jointly handled. And it's beyond my wheelhouse to say if it's right or wrong. It doesn't surprise me that both agencies are involved. There are parts of the scientific community, the expertise, quote unquote, over in FDA that probably makes sense on the front end of that production system. Where USDA is, as I understand the announcement, going to be heavily involved is the labeling in particular of those products on the back end. Most of our listeners probably know USDA AMS, so Ag Marketing Service, is already very present in labeling. They have a hand in verifying certain claims already, so it kind of makes sense that they're doing that. So as a broad Tonsor reaction to that, it sort of makes sense. Details are still to be flushed out. I believe the comment period is open until about Christmas. So most likely this is going to be how it plays out, but because there's an open final comment period and this is a pretty political topic, time will tell exactly what the final details are. But if we gain some clarity on who is overseeing the labeling, then that gets us a step closer to understanding what the actual labeling will be, and then maybe I could start gaining some insight on exactly how the consumer demand responses will be.
Well, producers do have a glance to Glynn's presentation on these topics, which, as he notes, is posted now on the agmanager.info website, agmanager.info. And Glynn, many thanks, as always.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Insight on the cattle markets and associated trends, Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension, and we'll return shortly on this Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Agriculture Today continues here on the K-State Radio Network. Want to bring you up to the moment now on a special event taking place Friday, December the 7th in southeast Kansas, and it is one of the key points in the calendar for what is called the Sunflower Supreme Heifer Development Program in Kansas. And our guest now is the individual responsible for overseeing that, K-State Research and Extension Beef Systems Specialist, Jaymelynn Farney. Jaymelynn, we've had the chance to visit about this program in the past. It continues to move along and apparently grow. This is a very exciting approach to heifer development.
It is, and we have new producers all the way to guys who've been in raising cattle for 50-plus years who are participating in the program. Not necessarily selling heifers, but going through the managerial practices to improve their replacement heifer development.
Well, go further on that if you would. The Sunflower Supreme Replacement Heifer Program, K-State and the Kansas Department of Agriculture partnered up to conduct this the last few years. Explain the premise behind it, if you would.
Yes. So our goal with the program is to provide practical managerial practices for cattle producers in regards to development, health, and bull selection to minimize calving issues and increase the longevity of replacement heifers within your operation. We began the program in conjunction with Kansas Department of Agriculture in 2012. We were kind of doing our educational components then. First set of heifers went through the program about 2013. So in regards to the program, all of the heifers have been managed similarly in the fact that we have specific pathogens that we want protected against in regards to vaccinations and timing of those vaccinations. Of course, we want a weaning and booster vaccination to first start those heifers off healthy, and then a pre-breeding vaccination to help with respiratory issues, but also to protect against some of those reproductive pathogens that might cause some issues during the summer. One of those is specifically leptospirosis. That's becoming even more of an issue, especially in the eastern side of the state, because the organism prefers to thrive in warm, stagnant water. On the eastern side of Kansas, we water out of a lot of ponds. And if you have leptospirosis in your pond, you can cause quite the abortion storm in your cow operation. So we require it within the program that you vaccinate against the leptospirosis organism prior to going out for your summer grazing. We also have some guidelines about sire selection. We've put emphasis on calving yeast direct because we believe that is the best measure to minimize calving difficulty, especially from the genetic perspective on the bull side. It takes into account both birth weight as well as dystocia from the reported from that bull. So that is one of the best measures to minimize calving issues from your bull selection criteria. We currently don't have any method to measure on the female outside of each female doing their own genetic test or having their own EPDs, but we don't require that in the program to date.
You do provide reproductive management tools, or at least endorse those to follow through on herd reproduction then?
Yes. To also be able to both try and help you make your reproductive decisions on your heifers, but also to make sure that they have the appropriate equipment to be a bred heifer, i.e. a functioning reproductive tract and a pelvic area that is large enough to be able to have a calf. We require in the program that all heifers go through a breeding soundness exam to be completed by a veterinarian, where they give us a tract score and pelvic area as well as a pelvic shape. The tract score component, we don't have anybody kick heifers out of the program based on tract score unless they are a free martin. And then that heifer's not allowed to be in the program. Mm-hmm. But from the tract score perspective, you can use that to make your managerial decisions. We know that heifers that are in a tract score of 4 or 5, meaning they have already cycled or are just about to cycle, you can specifically choose to AI or artificially inseminate those heifers, and you're going to have a greater chance of getting them stuck or to conceive to the AI. When you go down to tract scores of 3 or less, your chances of getting them to stick to AI decrease fairly rapidly. So you might be able to just use your bulls to naturally service those heifers to be able to try and give you a greater chance of getting more animals bred in the first 21 days.
And to add to the requirements under the guidelines of the program, there is the expectation upon producers participating that they collect data on their reproduction program and keep fairly tight records on what's going on, you say? Yes.
As part of the program, we know exact AI dates if the producer chooses to AI, and we know the days that the bulls are turned out. And we require in the program a 60-day breeding window. In our opinion, especially if you utilize synchronization protocols, which we do capture that data as well, if you use synchronization protocols, that gives you 3 opportunities or 3 cycles that heifer should have went through. If you can't get a replacement heifer bred in 3 cycles, she probably isn't the most fertile animal and shouldn't be maintained in your operation anyways. So we put a little bit more emphasis on trying to get reproduction improved in the animals through that method. As well, as part of the program, we do an early pregnancy diagnosis, 90 days from the start of your breeding season. So when the veterinarian is preg-checking these heifers, they will all be carrying a pregnancy between 30 days and 90 days, and that allows us to stage them. So you can use a estimated calving date to be able to group your heifers by calving groups, so you can maybe manage your labor a little better at time of calving instead of checking every heifer all the time, all night long. You can kind of more consciously manage your labor.
Well, all of this, Jaymelynn, is geared toward adding value to those to-be replacement heifers and therefore enhance the opportunities to market them at a premium. And that leads us to the sales that take place each year that feature these heifers that have gone through the program. One such sale is set for Friday, December the 7th in Fredonia. Tell us what is happening there, if you would.
Yes, as you said, when all the heifers go through our program and meet all the guidelines, they're identified by a beautiful purple ear tag that has our logo. Right. And you know that they've been third-party certified to have completed all of our management practices. And so the producers have the option to sell in a special sponsored sale, which you had mentioned. It's going to be in Fredonia on December 7th, beginning at 6 p.m. This is our 5th annual Sunflower Supreme bred heifer sale. We have about 170 commercial bred heifers that will be going through the sale, being offered in lots of 3 head up to 5 or 6 head. They are clustered by sire groups and calving dates, and so you should be able to find animals that could fit in with your operation. We have a wide range of calving windows, anywhere from about the first part of February through the first part of April, so hopefully you can find some females that fit in with your program. Now, one of the things that we have really been liking about the Sunflower Supreme Heifer program is I've been collecting data back on the heifers who go through the program. And currently, we have about 4% of all the heifers who go through the Sunflower Supreme Heifer program that have calving difficulty. More than half of those are abnormal presentations. That backwards calf, one with a leg back, upside down, things that we cannot managerially control. Right. So why am I so excited about that 4% value? Well, according to the most recent National Animal Health Monitoring Service survey, the average number of replacement heifers that had to have assistance at calving was 15%. So we have drastically reduced that. Indeed.
Folks can go to the specific website for the program to learn more about how it works and to find out more directly about this upcoming sale in Fredonia, right, Jaymelynn?
Yes. Please go to our website, sunflowersupreme.org, and if you cannot remember that, if you just Google sunflower and heifer, we're the first website that comes up.
Excellent. Big doings taking place Friday, December the 7th, 6 o'clock that evening at the Fredonia Livestock Market in Fredonia, southeast Kansas. The 2018 Sunflower Supreme Spring Bred Heifer Sale. Go to sunflowersupreme.org for full information on all of what we've covered with Jaymelynn today. Jaymelynn, thank you, and good luck with the sale coming up not too long from now. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Eric.
That from Jaymelynn Farney. She's a beef systems specialist for K-State Research and Extension, reminding us of what has become an utterly successful program in support of prime heifer development here in the state of Kansas for the beef cattle industry. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you on this Monday. Thanks for joining us once again. Now, today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN, and a follow-up to a subject we took up with K-State's Glynn Tonsor earlier in the broadcast. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association has hailed that decision by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration to collaborate on overseeing the production of cultured meats from livestock and poultry. The two agencies concluded the joint agreement last week following a series of discussions over the use of livestock and poultry cells to develop cell-cultured food products. As part of the deal, the FDA will oversee cell collection, cell banks, and cell growth, as well as differentiation. The USDA will be responsible for the production and labeling of food products derived from the cells of livestock and poultry. Now, the NCBA's Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, Colin Woodall, praised the move by the two agencies, but cautioned that there was still lots of work to be done on the issue. He is encouraging producers to file their official comments with the USDA and FDA between now and December the 26th. What does a new poll show about how American consumers feel about genetically modified foods? Here's more on that from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
A new consumer poll out this week seems to verify what Cornell University researcher Dr. David Just told a congressional panel.
There's a large and growing number of consumers that now stigmatize GMOs in the U.S. Consumers associate GMOs primarily with some unquantifiable health risk.
The new Pew Research Center poll shows about half, 49% of Americans think genetically modified foods are worse for your health than non-GMOs, and that's up from 39% 2 years ago. This belief continues to grow, even though Harvard University's Dr. Gary Adamkowitz says,
we don't have a lot of evidence that shows that GMO foods are bad for our health. I say that as a researcher.
Even so, Caleb Harper with MIT says the GMO stigma remains, and it's going to be very hard
to try to build trust with a consumer that frankly says, I don't believe you, no matter what you say to me.
Because it's not an issue of science. It's an issue of public perceptions,
which Harvard's Dr. Kalestis Juma says are very hard to change. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
China is fighting an uphill battle against deadly and highly contagious African swine fever, which is threatening the domestic swine industry in the world's largest market for pork. Despite all-out efforts by the government there to contain the disease, which started more than 3 months ago, the fever has spread with possibly dire consequences for China's agriculture and economy as a whole. The crisis took another troubling turn last Friday when the country confirmed the first case in a wild boar, raising the difficulty of containment. Authorities have also confirmed that the outbreak has spread to the southwestern province of Sichuan, the top hog-raising region. China's first case of African swine fever was reported back in early August on a farm in the northeastern province of Liaoning, where 47 pigs were confirmed to have been lost to the disease. The initial claim by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs that the outbreak had been controlled has since been proven to be wrong. And China's efforts to broaden their sources for grain imports continues, with Kazakhstan the latest to be approved to ship barley and corn to China. The country has embarked on an effort to bring in more grains and oilseeds from other countries after the U.S.-China trade frictions have seen China hit a host of U.S. grains and oilseeds with import duties of at least 25%. But the approval of Kazakhstan as a barley supplier is seen as more of an effort to replace or minimize the impacts of a potential limit on imports of Australian barley, as China announced it was opening an anti-dumping probe into barley imports from Australia. Despite the allowance for Kazakhstan, most doubt that there will be a huge rise in exports from the former Soviet country, as logistics are likely to curb the level of imports, keeping the volume minimal. That's according to analysts quoted by Reuters. This situation also comes as President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are poised to meet after the G20 meeting in Argentina later this week, when the hope is that the two officials will come to terms on a framework agreement that would set the stage for additional negotiations with an aim at reducing the trade tensions between the two countries. A quick calendar reminder for you cow-calf producers, K-State will be hosting more of those calving schools across Kansas. In the month of December, you want to get those on your calendar. There will be a number of featured topics during each of these programs, and they will take place Tuesday, December the 11th in Yates Center, then 2 on Thursday, December the 13th. One will be taking place in the morning in Kingman, then Thursday the 13th in the evening at McPherson. And there are likewise these beef calving schools set for locations in north central and southwest Kansas in January. You can go to ksubeef.org for full details on these. But again, K-State hosting more of those beef calving schools coming up in December and January. Check them out at ksubeef.org. Now this week's edition of Tree Tales. Here's K-State forester Charlie Barden. Charlie?
With the rising costs of propane and electricity, many people are thinking about using wood to heat their home, but there are several things to consider. First, check with your homeowner's insurance to see if there will be a premium increase and to get current specifications for safe installation of wood-burning heaters. Follow these directions closely for your own safety and to make sure your insurance is not voided by an improperly installed stove. Also, check with your city codes department to see if there are other regulations in your area. Wood stoves have been greatly improved in recent years and are a far cry from your grandparents' black potbelly or simple box stoves. Most are airtight now, which means you can adjust the draft and control the rate at which the wood is burned. A removable ash drawer allows you to empty accumulated ashes without having to let the fire go completely out, which is a great help in cold weather. Some of the most advanced stoves even have catalytic converters, which help ignite unburned gases escaping the fire, thus producing more heat and less air pollution. The most sophisticated are the pellet stoves, which need to be loaded just once a day and use a small auger to feed the firebox according to how much heat is needed. However, pellet stoves also need to have electricity to operate the auger and the fan, so they cannot be used for emergency heat during power outages. Operating a wood stove is definitely more work than just adjusting the thermostat of your furnace, but many homeowners see the operation of a wood stove as a satisfying hobby that they enjoy. Activities associated with wood burning include cutting and splitting the wood, carrying it inside, starting and stoking the fire, and removing ashes. With the high cost of propane and electricity, this hobby can also save you money on your heating bill. When selecting a wood stove, some important questions to ask yourself are, will this be the primary or just a supplemental source of heat? How big of an area will be heated? Are aesthetics or efficiency the most important? The answers to these questions will help guide you in making a wise purchase. You've been listening to Tree Tales. I'm Charles Barden, a forester with K-State Research and Extension.
Given our weather the last 48 hours, a very timely topic indeed. Thanks, Charlie. You are listening to Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggle to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. Extension Specialist Anissa Jepsen and Program Coordinator Chris Mullins are 2 relatively new employees with Kansas 4-H. Last week, Chris discussed his role in working with Kansas 4-H youth and volunteers. This week, Anissa talks about her 4-H background and the areas that she'll be focusing on with Kansas 4-H. Anissa, you have been with Kansas 4-H since August, so you're kind of getting your feet on the ground and a chance for us to meet you on the radio for the first time. Give us a little detail as to what you were doing before you came to Kansas 4-H.
Well, I am a 4-H'er tried and true. I grew up as a 4-H'er. I was parent of 4-H'ers, and then I worked in Iowa with the 4-H program as a county agent. Most recently, I worked with the Girl Scouts of Kansas and Missouri.
So you've got a background dealing with youth from way back.
That's right. Positive youth development is something that I'm very passionate about, and I believe in the process, and what 4-H does for youth is just amazing.
You're working in an area that they're really trying to beef up as it comes to science, technology, engineering, and math.
That's right. So I'm really excited. My new position is STEM and natural resources. And the best part about being a STEM state specialist is science isn't everything. And so getting to really look at all the project areas in Kansas and identifying the ways that we're already doing STEM programming.
Talk a little bit more about that in terms of what you've noticed so far, things that you really like about the direction of the program.
So I'm really excited because the best part about Kansas 4-H so far has been all the support at the county level. And I think that's really exciting. We have some really great agents that are doing some really amazing things and are making a priority of the STEM project area. And I think it's important that we always look at agriculture, and the things that agriculture does in STEM is exciting. And that's one of the best kind of gateways into 4-H as we always think of ag, but science is just as important. It was really exciting, though, as I was researching this position and seeing that I really did believe in the way that Kansas 4-H is moving in the right direction.
You've also got some other responsibilities. You're working with military, some after-school programs, the shooting program, and again, the science programs.
Yeah, so I'm really excited this year. We are working with Riley, Leavenworth, and McConnell military installations. We just were approved for our funding for this year. And this is super exciting because Fort Riley especially is the third largest Army base. And having it housed in Kansas, I think it's important that we really look at our military youth. It's an interesting population because it's a non-traditional 4-H experience for them. So I think it's important that we as 4-H and youth development professionals really look at the way that we can offer 4-H programming to the youth that are moving in and out of military installations. And so I'm excited to work with some great county agents, some amazing boards that are really supportive of the work that we're planning to do in these counties, and really grow the military 4-H experience.
Will these be in those counties specifically, or will you go to some of the neighboring communities?
So the really exciting thing about this grant is that we have looked at some programming that is for our military reserve units throughout the state. So we will actually be doing programming not only in the 3 counties where the installations are housed, but we'll also be doing outreach programming for those youth that are connected to the military and are already 4-H members.
One of the things that is nice about 4-H is it is an organization where if they do get reassigned to another location, they can still continue this same programming in another town.
Right. So that's kind of our hope in general when looking at the military 4-H program across the nation and in the world, is that as these youth are PCSing with their families, that they can pick up their project learning wherever they are. And I think that's really important, especially as a military family, because there are so many uncertainties that if 4-H is something that's always available in every installation that they go to, it's an easier transition for the youth to make.
And the fact that it does have that social aspect and give them the because it can be difficult, especially at certain age groups, to kind of blend into a new situation.
Right. And the great thing about 4-H is that growing of that adult-youth partnership. And so giving youth the opportunity to make the relationships with the adults that are in their communities already is a really good way to build that trust, to build programming opportunities. And I'm just really excited about being a part of a much bigger operation.
Will this also then kind of dovetail into the after-school programming?
Right. So the one really interesting thing about 4-H is often we're known for our community clubs, but a lot of times in counties that have more non-traditional youth, that there is a lot of after-school programming or school enrichment programming. And so this is one of the ways that we can reach those youth that maybe don't have a traditional 4-H background by offering some after-school programming.
And again, some of this will then tie in along with the science aspect as well?
Right. And so that's the really exciting thing as well about my position, is because we know that there is a definite move towards science and technology programming. And so then we're able to really identify the needs within the communities, and hopefully our agents on the ground are able to deliver programming that the school and the communities have identified as important, while still keeping those traditional 4-H community clubs and our agricultural focus.
And for the shooting programs, what's involved with that?
So shooting sports is an exciting program for youth that are interested in the disciplines. And so it's really exciting for them to be able to learn the proper use of firearms. And we have state matches, and we also have youth that participate in national shooting sports competitions. The really great thing about shooting sports that I think that people don't understand maybe quite so well is that youth are really learning skills that can help them throughout their life.
And safety is always the number one aspect right there.
Yeah, and that's the other really great thing is that we have some really great volunteers that are really focused on making sure that our youth are safe, that they're learning the proper way to handle firearms, and that they're always looking towards growing that relationship between the youth and adult partnerships so that they have those positive role models that can help them guide them in any project area that they're interested in.
Sounds like you started at a really good time, a chance to kind of get your feet on the ground before you really move into your first full year.
That's right. So it's been a really busy year, but I think that we have some really exciting things coming along. And I'm excited to meet all the people that work already for Kansas 4-H and Extension. It's been a great group of people to kind of move into working alongside them, and I'm excited to hear about all the great things that they're doing.
Well, certainly nice to meet you, and I'm sure that we will talk again in the coming year.
Well, thank you for having me.
That's Kansas 4-H Extension Specialist Anissa Jepsen. She's in the early stages of overseeing the science and technology programs. To find out more about Kansas 4-H, contact the local Extension office or visit kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.